The night was cold and unkind, the kind of night that makes you question why the world is so unfair. Under the flickering streetlight outside St. Francis Memorial Hospital, a thin man wrapped in torn blankets huddled beside a rusted trash can fire. His beard was wild, his fingers blackened from cold, and his name, long forgotten by most, was Arthur Hale. Arthur had once been someone. Years ago, he had worn fine suits, attended business meetings, and driven luxury cars. But a few bad decisions, one failed investment, and the death of his wife had driven him into the spiral that ended on the streets. Now he was invisible, just another homeless man mumbling to himself. But tonight was different. The hospital across the street glowed with activity. Doctors rushed through the entrance, media vans crowded the driveway, and armed security kept everyone at a distance. Something big was happening. Arthur shuffled closer, curiosity overriding caution. Through the revolving glass doors, he caught sight of a man being wheeled in on a stretcher, surrounded by nurses and bodyguards. The man's face was pale, lifeless, but recognizable. Arthur froze. It was Leonard Grant, the billionaire. The man who had once been Arthur's business partner, and the one who had betrayed him 15 years ago. Grant had left Arthur to take the fall for a corporate crime both had committed. Arthur went bankrupt, lost his family, and ended up here, in rags, watching from the cold sidewalk as his enemy was rolled into the ICU. The news broadcast from a nearby van confirmed it. Greater than, billionaire Leonard Grant fell into a coma after a mysterious accident at his mansion. Sources say he slipped and hit his head during a private gathering. Arthur stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and disbelief. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. That night, something inside him snapped. He wandered around the hospital perimeter, unseen and unwanted, until he found an unlocked maintenance door. The temptation was too strong. He slipped inside. He moved silently through dim corridors, avoiding staff, following signs that read ICU, Level 4. Each step echoed with memories, the deals, the betrayals, the laughter, the lies. When he finally reached the ICU window, he saw him again. Leonard Grant, lying motionless, hooked to machines, tubes feeding him life. Arthur's fists trembled. All his suffering, all his years on the streets, all his humiliation, it was because of that man. For 10 long minutes, he stood frozen, torn between revenge and pity. Then, without knowing why, Arthur did something insane. He climbed onto the billionaire's bed. The nurses were gone. The night shift was quiet. The only sound was the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor. Arthur leaned over him. "You remember me, Leonard?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "You took everything. You made me a ghost." His hands hovered near the tubes. The power to end it all was right there. One pull, one move, and justice would be served. But as he stared closer, he saw something that stopped him cold. There was a tear rolling down the billionaire's cheek. A tear, from a man in a coma. Arthur froze. He leaned in closer. Leonard's lips moved. Just barely, forming a soundless word that sent chills through Arthur's spine. "Arthur." The homeless man stumbled back, shaking. How could that be possible? Leonard hadn't seen him in years. "Are you awake?" Arthur whispered, trembling. Leonard's fingers twitched. His breathing changed. The machines began to beat faster. Arthur panicked, climbed off the bed, and pressed himself against the wall. The door burst open. Nurses rushed in. What happened? His pulses rising. Arthur ducked behind a curtain, heart pounding, as they surrounded the billionaire. Coma response detected. He's trying to communicate. Arthur could barely breathe. Somehow, his presence had awakened something inside the man who destroyed him. And he didn't know whether it was a miracle, or a curse. Arthur didn't sleep that night. He hid in the hospital's boiler room, his mind racing with confusion and guilt. Why had Leonard said his name? How could a man in a coma recognize him? By dawn, Arthur's anger had faded into something stranger, a sense of unfinished business. He needed answers. He cleaned himself up in the bathroom sink, stole a nurse's jacket from a laundry cart, and made his way back to the ICU. Room 407. Leonard lay there, still motionless, but the monitors showed improvement. Doctors murmured about unusual neural activity and possible recovery. When they left, Arthur slipped inside. He stood beside the bed, studying the man who'd once been his best friend. 15 years ago, they'd built a financial empire together, Hale and Grant Enterprises. Then came the scandal. Insider trading, a collapse, and an FBI investigation. Leonard had framed Arthur to save himself. Arthur had served 2 years in prison. Leonard had walked free and rebuilt his fortune. Now, both men were ghosts of their former selves, one rich and lifeless, the other poor and broken. Arthur sat beside the bed and whispered, "Why me, Leonard? Why did you ruin me?" He didn't expect an answer, but the billionaire's eyelids fluttered. His lips twitched again, forming a faint whisper. "Sorry." Arthur's throat tightened. He leaned closer, eyes wide. "You can hear me. Forgive me." Arthur's hands trembled. His vision blurred with tears he hadn't shed in years. "You think sorry fixes everything. I lost my wife. She died because of the shame, Leonard. I lost my son. He hates me. I lost myself." The machines beeped rapidly. Leonard's fingers moved weakly. He was responding. Arthur stood up, overwhelmed. He turned to leave, but then the billionaire's voice came again, broken, barely audible. "Safe. Deposit. Key. Under. Frame." Arthur froze. He turned back. "What did you say?" Leonard's pulse spiked, and his voice faded into silence again. Arthur searched the room, heart racing. Beneath the bedside photo frame, the one showing Leonard's family, he found it, a small brass key wrapped in tape. A key to something. Arthur pocketed it and left before the nurses returned. Hours later, he stood before a private bank downtown, the kind where ordinary people aren't allowed past the lobby. But when he handed the key to the manager, the man recognized the seal. "Mr. Grant's private vault. Right this way." Inside was a single box. No gold, no cash, just documents, photos, and a USB drive. Arthur opened the files in a corner terminal. What he saw made his knees go weak. It was proof. Evidence that Leonard Grant had falsified the company records years ago, exonerating Arthur completely. Letters of guilt. A video confession. Legal papers naming Arthur as rightful co-owner of Hale and Grant's successor company. Leonard had been planning to confess before the accident. Arthur's entire life, all his suffering, could finally be justified. But as he scrolled, something else caught his eye. An unsigned letter, dated a week ago. Greater than, to Arthur Hale. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I know you hate me, and you should. But I've been searching for you for years, trying to find you on the streets. I wanted to make things right. Everything I took from you, it's yours again. I'm sorry I waited this long." Arthur dropped the paper, his chest tightening with emotion. The man he'd hated most in the world had spent his last days trying to redeem himself. And now, Leonard Grant's life hung by a thread, a life Arthur could easily end, or save. He looked at the hospital bracelet still in his pocket. He knew what he had to do next. Arthur returned to the hospital that evening, no longer hiding. He walked straight through the lobby, past the security guards, and into the ICU like he belonged there. Leonard's condition had worsened. The monitors blinked faintly, his breathing was shallow. The doctors whispered words like multi-organ failure. Arthur stood by the bed, his heart heavy. He remembered the nights he'd slept under bridges, the hunger, the humiliation, all because of this man. But now, looking at him, Arthur didn't see a billionaire. He saw another broken soul. He reached out and took Leonard's cold hand. "You tried to fix it," he whispered. "You were late, but you tried." Tears welled in his eyes as he placed the confession papers on the nightstand. "I forgive you, Leonard. I don't know why, but I do." The monitor beeped faster. Leonard's eyelids fluttered open. Slowly, painfully, and for the first time, he truly woke up. The room filled with nurses, gasps, and chaos, but Leonard's gaze locked on Arthur. His voice was faint, cracking. "You found it." Arthur nodded, smiling through tears. "I did." Leonard's eyes glistened. "You'll rebuild." Arthur squeezed his hand. "Not just rebuild. I'll make it mean something this time." The billionaire's lips curved into a fragile smile before his eyes drifted shut again. Peaceful, this time. The machine steadied. He wasn't gone. Just resting. Days later, Arthur stood outside the hospital in clean clothes, holding a letter of ownership from Leonard's lawyers. He was officially reinstated as co-owner of the empire he'd helped build. The homeless man was no longer homeless. But more than that, he was free. He didn't go back to the luxury life. Instead, he opened a foundation, the Grant Hale Shelter, a place for the lost, the broken, the forgotten. When Leonard finally recovered months later, he found Arthur waiting at his bedside again, not with anger, but with friendship. Leonard whispered, "Why'd you forgive me?" Arthur smiled. "Because hate kept me on the streets. Forgiveness brought me home." They sat in silence. Two men who had once destroyed each other, now healing in the same room. Outside the window, dawn broke, soft light falling on the city that had once swallowed Arthur whole. This time, he was ready to face it. Because sometimes, the richest man isn't the one who owns everything, but the one who learns how to forgive.